It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
We need to know our children well enough to know what lights them up, to see where they find delight.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
How much joy is in your joy tank this morning, Mrs. Happy Families?
Oh, come on. Have you given me a hard time about being a crank?
No, I'm not.
I think you are.
I was just asking the question. Are you feeling joyful?
Look, normally I am, but not today.
Really? Why is
I'm
that?
a bit tired. It's been a big couple of weeks.
Okay.
I've been unpacking the second shipping container.
Yeah, all of our gear, which is squeezing into our house bit by bit. Kids back at school.
There's been a lot to work through and I'm feeling it. And I am training for a 10-kilometre run.
Yeah, we haven't told anybody what's going on there. This is not the point of the podcast, but what's the deal? Fill everyone in. What's happening with this 10K run?
When we moved up to the coast, I made a conscious effort because we live so close to the water that I wouldn't get in the car to go to the beach.
Right.
And so each morning I've been going down and doing a little run. It's only little. It's 1.5 to the beach. And then I sit down there and I meditate and have some time to ponder before I run home.
Yeah.
So it's a very short run and there's a 40-minute gap in between my 3Ks total.
Sure. So 1.5 there, rest, 1.5 home.
Yeah. I'm not trying to beat anyone's time or anything like that. I'm just moving my body.
Yep.
But we recently caught up with friends and, you know, they're doing a marathon in November.
Right.
And I jokingly said, we should go on a holiday. And they said, well, we're going to Queenstown and we're running a marathon. And I thought, well, I want a holiday and Queenstown's a pretty nice place to do it. And if I'm going to go and watch them, I don't want to watch them.
How boring. How boring.
I'm not interested in running a marathon, but I'm really happy to push myself and run a 10K run. So I've signed up.
This is the first event that you've ever done like this in your life.
I probably will be what do you call that person at the very end who rounds everybody up?
The loser?
No. But I'm not really interested in a time. I just am interested in challenging myself. So as a result, I am feeling a little bit sore and a little bit tired.
Yeah.
And probably a little bit grumpier than normal.
Yeah. When you exercise and your body's not used to it, we all know that you've been exercising. Not like me at all.
Of course
I'm
not.
used to exercising and getting up at ridiculous o'clock. Hey, so your joy tank's a little on the low side, but doesn't it feel good to know that you're working your way up to a 10K? How far did you run this morning?
I did 4.3 this morning. That's the furthest I've run so far.
How exciting. So you've only got an extra, do you reckon you've got another 6Ks in you?
Well, look, I was talking to my coach.
Who's your coach? I didn't know you had a coach.
I have a very good friend who's been running her whole life.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And she just said to get to 5Ks and just to keep running 5Ks until I love running 5Ks.
Well, you're only 700 metres off getting the 5K.
That's right. And then I just have to get myself used to, conditioned to actually running 5Ks. And she said not to do it every day.
Hey, Alyssa, thanks for the great tip. I know that David listens to the podcast daily, so it's nice to have some high-quality coaching to help Kylie to get to her 10K.
You know, if it wasn't for Alyssa, I actually would never have started running and I probably would never have believed I was capable of doing it. And whenever I feel like I'm just not getting there, a quick phone call to her and she just bumps up my motivation and my belief.
What I love about this conversation is we're talking really about refilling our kids' joy tanks in this podcast, but you were feeling flat when we started the conversation a couple of minutes ago, and there's life in you again. And there's a reason for it, and it ties in with one of the 6 things that I want to share to help our kids to be happier, which I'll get back to shortly. But let's talk about this idea. I mean, our kids, they go through a lot. I've got that great quote in the front of Misconnection, the book that I wrote about teenage girls, Misconnection, Why Your Teenage Daughter Hates You, Expects the World and Needs to Talk. The quote comes from Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and it's Draco Malfoy speaking to Harry, and he says, people say parenting is the hardest job. It's not. Growing up is. And our kids, sometimes they really struggle. Sometimes they're not that happy. And while we can't make our children happy, we can't make anyone anything. They have to choose it for themselves. There are certain things that we can do to create conditions where happiness comes to them much more easily. We're actually dealing at the moment with one child who has always been a little bit anxious, but frankly, I think that there's a lot more going on at the moment for her. And we have tried to quote unquote make her happy. We're trying to refill her joy tank and we can't. And this is a really hard thing for parents to know and understand, is that sometimes you cannot make your child happy. You can facilitate all of the right conditions. You can do everything to make it easy for them to be happy if they will choose it. But sometimes, no matter how much you do, they will intentionally choose misery.
It's probably a little bit of a side tangent, but I think this is where emotional intelligence is so important, helping our children to actually recognize the emotions that they're feeling and giving them the space to go through them as well. You know, if our children are sad, trying to fill their joy tank in that sad space without actually allowing them to flow through that in an appropriate way is actually probably in some ways more damaging.
Yeah, so tomorrow in I'll Do Better Tomorrow, I'm going to share something where I completely blew it around that. Just a little teaser. You can hear about the parenting expert getting it totally wrong and how you came to the rescue. But let's talk about what we can do to facilitate an environment where kids can be happy, recognizing that sometimes if your child has anxiety or depression, if your child's being bullied, if there are things going on in your child's life, sometimes you can't make them happy. But if we want to refill their joy tanks, I have six ideas.
I wonder if they're the same as mine.
Okay, I didn't know you had a list. I thought it was just my list today. What's your list? Let's go with you first.
No, I'll just listen. I'll add.
All right, okay, fine. Well, my first one is that we need to actually understand the sources of joy that they experience. Like, we need to know our children well enough to know what lights them up, to see where they find delight, what their sources of flow are. Like, you know, that thing where you lose track of time, you just get so absorbed in what you're doing. If we understand our children's sources of joy, like some kids, we've got a couple of kids for whom quiet contentment is pure bliss for them. And we also have a couple of children who seek active thrills.
Like climbing on top of the roof.
Like climbing on, at what time was that she did that? Like 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night with her friends just the other night? I was like, what are you doing on the roof in the rain at 10:30 at night? Talk about possums on the roof. My goodness. But
It sounded like elephants, believe you me.
So we need to understand our children's sources of joy. What actually does light them up?
I think sometimes one of the challenges we have is that sometimes our children actually don't know what their source of joy is.
Yeah, but we do. Like, you can tell when your children are alive. And I say the word alive as in when they're vital and vibrant. Even if the kids, because you say, well, what makes you happy? And the kid's like, I don't know. But you know, as a parent.
As a parent, I can definitely recognise and see when my kids are in that flow state and they're happy. But sometimes it takes children a little while to work out what that is. And as parents, you know, facilitating opportunities for a wide range of activities is so important if you've got a child like that who just hasn't found their happy space. We've had children who wanted to play different instruments but started playing those instruments and didn't actually really enjoy them, but then have found the instrument that they wanted. But it takes time sometimes, even as an adult now. You know, your likes and interests change over time.
Yeah, okay. So what you're saying is sometimes to find what it is that's going to bring them joy or flow, there's going to need to be some experimentation.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're not going to experiment hardcore with a 3-year-old.
No, definitely not. I'm thinking back to the conversation we had with your mum around twins and kind of giving them experiences that were individual and just that acknowledgement. You know, we've done it so many times. We've got this many children. They're all going to do this activity because that's all I have the capacity to do, get from A to B with all of them and they can all participate. But some of the children flourished in that situation and some of them didn't.
Yeah. It feels like in some ways there's a bit of pressure on us as parents to help our kids to find this. I mean, you're right. I don't disagree at all with what you're saying, but there are easier things that we can do as well. And after the break, we're going to talk about those 5 things. Get curious, not furious. Be where your feet are. Mistakes lead to mastery. High emotions, low intelligence. Have you ever heard these or any of the other principles I share and thought, I need to stick that on my wall? Well, now you can. The Happy Families team has pulled out the best Justinisms for A5 mini posters. Perfect for your home or even the classroom and easy to grab at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And I'm guessing you've got some answers.
So if we want to help our children to find joy, we can do it by seeking extracurricular activities and trying to enrich their lives and do all the things that we were talking about before the break, which are useful and helpful. And research shows that they can really move the needle for our kids in terms of their development and the life and light that they experience.
I'm not actually talking about extracurricular though, by the way. Your children might be creative, but they haven't found the creative source. We've got a child who now paints incredibly well, but as a young child, I could never give her, kind of significant scope with painting.
Yeah, but she'll lose herself for days in a picture, won't she?
Yeah, but it's just about providing different, mediums for our kids to play with. Maybe your kid doesn't love playing with Lego, but they actually absolutely get stuck on that Mobilo stuff.
Yeah, or the magnetic sort of things. Yeah, fair enough.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we kind of work with what we're comfortable with, only to realise that there's a myriad of other opportunities out there in that same area that we can do within our own home.
I mean, I said I've got 6 things, but you've just given me a 7th, and that is creativity. Creativity makes people happy. We don't always want to be creative in the same ways. We've got one daughter who loves art, and she also loves to write songs. We've got another daughter who loves to be creative in her writing, like just wants to write and journal and create. We have crafty kids. This is the great thing with 6 kids, right? You discover that everyone has a different way of expressing their creativity. I look at how you're creative versus how I'm creative. It's a wonderful way to find flow and find joy is to do things that are creative. We're going to run out of time if you keep on interrupting me, though. I'm supposed to be the expert here, not you, Mrs. Coulson.
I haven't said anything.
Right. So the second thing that I wanted to highlight, if we want to help our children to refill their joy tanks, is connection. Connection is at the heart of well-being. Connection. I've been watching as one of our older daughters has just moved back home after having a couple of months away from us because we were in the process of moving up here and she was working in Brisbane. And I've watched the way she's connected with the sisters. And while there's occasional conflict and far too much control in moments here and there, overall, they've had so much fun connecting, going for walks, playing card games, reading, doing activities. The connection has lit them up. And I just think connection with siblings or with friends, having play dates. I know. Now, I want to pause on play dates for a second. You hate play dates.
No, that's not true.
You hate organising play dates.
No, that's not true.
You hate ringing people and saying, hey, can our kids get together?
I hate ringing people I don't know and don't have a relationship with and asking.
Yeah. Okay. So there's and I've spoken with a lot of parents over the last few years who have highlighted a genuine level of anxiety that they experience when they have to reach out to another parent and say, can our kids get together, especially when they don't know them well. It's one thing when they know them well, but when the sense of connection is weak. It's a really big thing. And so what I want to emphasize is that connection brings joy.
But sometimes it's not even about anxiety. As a young mum with multiple children I don't have time to sit down with a new mum that I'm trying to build a relationship with so that our kids can have a 2-hour play date while I've got other children, different ages that require my time and attention, or the dinner needs to be put on. And you would always suggest, well, why don't you see if they can go and play at their house? And then I'm asking another young mum who's got multiple children to have my child, and it feels like I'm asking her to babysit my child.
So it does make it tricky, and yet connection is so important. I will say, though, in my defence, marginally, that once the kids are getting together and playing, you usually get a whole lot more done because the kids are happy. They're not clinging to you and
yeah, but in new relationships, usually parents aren't going to just drop their child off for a play. So then you are involved in that dialogue, which obviously over time enriches. But as a time-poor parent, often it feels it's just another thing we have to add to the list.
And you've just reminded me of some research that I read last week. To create an adult friendship, researchers believe that it takes about 30 hours of time together before you're at a point where you might call it a casual friendship, where you know the person well enough to give them a call, send them a text and say, hey, here's what's going on, or do you want to get together? And it takes about 50 hours to have what would be considered a strong friendship. That's a lot of time together, especially when you're a stressed out, tired, over it young mum or dad who just wants the kids to play, but you don't want to have to, 30 hours. That's a lot of time.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at that and you kind of think, well, I've got friends over here that I meet at playgroup, but you'll generally only catch up with them at playgroup because your relationship is still so new. And yes, you gravitate to them at playgroup, but you still haven't branched out of that playgroup situation.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. And yet I still have to stand by this. If we want to refill our kids' joy tanks, it's all about connection with friends, whether it's play dates or it's at the park, even if it comes at a cost to us.
I didn't actually tell you how I actually managed to push myself to do the 4Ks.
Right.
I saw another lady who was running, and she was running parallel with me between the car parks. And I could tell she was running about my speed.
Right.
And so we verged onto the same path at one point. And so we were running side by side. And I just happened to be listening to Bon Jovi's "Oh, We're Halfway There, Take My Hand."
I can't believe you're listening to Bon Jovi. Why are you listening to Bon Jovi?
I've got an oldies track. Ella put it together for me, and it's the perfect mix. It's just a really good, steady rhythm.
It can't be the perfect mix if it's got John Bon Jovi on it. But anyway.
Anyway, we're halfway there. And I was about halfway along my track. And so I pulled my headphones out and I looked at her and I said, "I'm listening to Bon Jovi," and he tells me we're halfway there. Are we there? Are we halfway there? And she said, "Well, I don't know where you're going."
Right.
But we ended up having a conversation. And for me, just having that human-to-human connection actually added pep to my step. And that's how I ran further than I've ever run.
I love it. Okay, so I've got 7 things to get through and we're at the second one already. Do you think we should finish this next week?
Oh, you're so funny. Are you going to talk about music and dancing?
Let me make that number 8. Music and dancing.
All right, come on. What's number 3?
You know what? Our time's up. We need to wrap it up here. So we're going to finish this conversation next week, refilling our kids' joy tanks. At this point, what we've discovered is that Kylie's going to do a 10K in New Zealand at the end of the year. We've also discovered that we need to understand the sources of joy that our children experience and that we can't make them happy. We've talked about the importance of finding flow and the power of connection. So in our next podcast next Monday, which was supposed to be our book club podcast, Mrs. Happy Families, that I'm so excited about.
Because you haven't finished reading your book. That's the only reason you're doing this.
What we'll do is we'll postpone the book club podcast for an extra couple of days so I can finish the book that I'm reading. And then
so slack.
And then we'll talk instead about these other ways that we can refill our kids' joy tanks. Okay, that's all coming up.
I know that wasn't the plan, but I actually think that this is a really important topic. When you think about all of the stresses that families are going through at the moment, refilling our joy cup. It's powerful.
Hey, I'm talking about a tank here.
Well, a tank.
A tank is much bigger than a cup, and we need to refill the whole thing. You know what I also appreciate about our conversation today is that it hasn't gone the way that we thought it would, but you've pushed back against some of my ideas and you've clarified them and shared really useful insights. And that's why this podcast's here. So, folks, we hope that you've really enjoyed the podcast today. We hope that it's given you some ideas, some food for thought, something to resonate to. And tomorrow, I'll do better tomorrow, where I get to highlight the big mistake that I made. Gosh, I'm not looking forward to that one. But you can look forward to it because the parenting expert gets it wrong with some level of frequency. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We so appreciate that you listen to the podcast. Thanks for being here. If you want more info about making your family happier, check it out at happyfamilies.com.au.